With one round of the National Football League remaining this coming weekend, we have a situation where 5 teams can qualify for the Division 1 final, but we aren't entirely sure which of the 5 teams actually want to qualify for the Division 1 final. I'm Will Slattery and I'm delighted to be joined for our chat today by Dublin legend Philly McMahon, who's come into the studio. Philly, thanks for joining me.
No problem, thanks for having me in.
No, great to have you. And I'll set the scene a little further before we kick off. Just ahead of the final round of games, we have Galway top of the table on 8 points, Dublin just behind them and Donegal behind them, also on 8 points. Galway leading the way with their score difference. We have Mayo then in 4th on 7 points, Kerry in 5th on 6 points, and Mayo and Kerry are in the situation where they can both make a league final and be relegated, so plenty on the line for them this weekend. Then we have Armagh 6th on 5 points and Tyrone in 7th on 5 points, Armagh leading them on their head-to-head tiebreaker from earlier in the campaign, and then Derry in last on 1 point. They have already been relegated after their defeat to Mayo last weekend. So to sum up, we have 5 teams, Galway, Dublin, Donegal, Mayo and Kerry, who can make a final. We have 4 teams, Mayo, Kerry, Armagh and Tyrone, who can get relegated. So lots on the line this weekend as we have Tyrone hosting Dublin, Galway hosting Kerry, Mayo at home to Donegal and Armagh at home to Derry. So I hope that didn't melt people's brains a little too much.
Take all that in.
Yeah, plenty to take in. So many things to start with Philly, but it just occurred to me, and I mentioned to you as we were walking in when I was printing off the league table, that there's a parallel GA universe not too far from this one where you've actually been on the line for Derry for the last couple of months, kind of plotting through these new rules, kind of getting your head around, things you've been writing about recently, like, do you want to make a league final? What team should I pick? Have you been watching the league at all through that prism?
Well, I've been following Derry a little bit more than I actually imagined I would, which has been interesting because I suppose when I spoke to Derry, I was fascinated by how much they were driven to try get a really good season, particularly with a new management team going in. So, it's weird when you get asked to take a job, you kind of you hone in on that team a little bit more. Like I don't know what it is. I mean, when I was a kid, I actually went on trials for Nottingham Forest, and I actually. Everton and I'm an Everton fan, and Everton and Nottingham Forest were for a relegation playoff, and I was devastated. So you just have that bit of connection to them. And look, Derry, it's been difficult over the last couple of seasons. They've had a roller coaster ride, those players, and it's been extremely difficult for them. And I'm sure any other group would have found it difficult. They've dealt with that as best they could, and yeah, it's been hard for Paddy Tally with the results they've got. But it's an extremely hard Division 1, and that's what I was excited for this year. You know what the biggest thing is, Will? When every year outside of the teams, the management teams, the GA public always use the league as a barometer to see who's going to compete in an All-Ireland series or who's going to get to the All-Ireland final or win it. And I'm coming to the stage now where I'm like, I don't think we can actually do that anymore. There's Derry who won the league last year and had a poor kind of ish championship and are relegated now.
Yeah, and I mentioned at the start, like, we don't actually know quite which teams actually want to progress that little bit further. Like you were writing last weekend, headline, weird logic of opting out of a National Football League title bid makes no sense to me. And you were kind of honing in on Jim McGuinness's comments after they beat Derry 2 weeks ago, where he basically said, like, the league final isn't the focus. My focus is doing what's right with my players and kind of getting them ready for, they're going to be playing Derry on the 6th of April, which will be 1 week after a league final. And just of the 5 teams in contention, like, this is the different schedules they subsequently have. If Galway were to make a league final, they'd have to play New York a week later.
Yeah.
If Dublin make a league final, they'd have a week off to focus on a Leinster opener, which doesn't seem too taxing on paper. Donegal, if they make a league final, 1 week later they play Derry.
Yep.
For Kerry, they'd have 3 weeks off until they might play Limerick potentially, and then Mayo, they'd be playing Sligo the following week if they made a league final. So each team has a very, very different schedule. So I can kind of understand why various teams are taking things at different paces.
I agree, and I understand where Jim McGuinness is coming from in regards to, there's such a Ulster football is, from working up there into my 4th year now, it's another level. It's an absolute, like, for you to win an Ulster championship, it's massive because you're playing with teams that are at the top table, let's say. So you've Donegal, who now are at the stage where they're saying, like, we can progress from last year. Probably disappointed that they didn't progress even further last year. And then you've got Tyrone with the new manager going in, hopefully getting that bounce. You've got Armagh All-Ireland champions, and you were hoping Derry would get the bounce of the new management going in, and considering where they've been the last couple of seasons. So I can understand what McGuinness is saying, but that has an impact on the energy of the group. That was my only kind of worry. Like, you see last weekend, you could see their energy was down, and they did play. Like, I think the right thing to do there, and in my experience with Dublin, when we've been at stages where we've been, at the top of the Division 1, potentially in a league final in the 2 weeks, 2 games to come, and kind of being playing sailing there, and fringe players playing, but you'd still, the strength of the squad, you'd still hope that you go on and you win those games, and that's your standard setter for you to potentially win an All-Ireland. So I was worried when I seen Donegal last weekend, and it's still a strong squad, but
11 changes
their energy
for the game
was
against
down.
Tyrone, and then Tyrone beat them in Donegal.
Yeah, their energy, they didn't. They looked like Michael Murphy played a full game. They looked flat, and it was nearly like the energy. You were liking to see, if Jim McGuinness made that amount of changes, that those players would be that hungry that they'd step up and they'd actually win that game. Like, fringe players don't go on and play and go,
I'm a fringe player,
yeah,
so I'll
we
play
just
like a
lose
fringe
this
player.
game.
Yeah.
And look, maybe Tyrone sniffed that a little bit. They sniffed that bit of complacency that they don't want to win this game here. They've 11 changes here. Let's get after them. So I understand from Donegal's point of view, but I also think that can be a danger, particularly 2 games out. What will they do this weekend? That's the big one, because they've done it already. They've played kind of the fringe players last weekend. What will they do this weekend? Considering that Derry game is going to be massive, because it's all or nothing for Derry.
Yeah, because if they kind of go in a similar vein this weekend, then you're thinking, how long is the layoff? Is it 4 weeks? Then it would have been since they kind of went to that other Derry game when they did go and win.
Yeah.
I suppose, because it's funny, because like reading Jim McGuinness's comments after the Tyrone game, he was saying, like, I think he maybe referring to you specifically, because he was like, someone writing about my motivation, like, he must know my mind. Like, so I'm not sure if you were having that.
That was me.
It probably was you. I was thinking, but like Jim McGuinness might say, well, like, it's easy for Philly McMahon, who played for Dublin, the Leinster Championship. You guys could have attacked the league and had plenty of time to get right in the provincial championships. Whereas for Jim, he's maybe thinking, the Ulster is my target. That he's already always put a lot of stock in that.
Yeah, it's just extremely hard for any player to go out and think you're going to lose. It really is at that level. Like, if that's what he's saying, if that's the intention, that he didn't want to get to a league final, well, then he has to lose. So how do you do that? Well, okay, you play a second tier team, but all of those players, if your squad is strong enough, should be thinking about competing for that jersey and getting that jersey to win. So it's very, like, how much is that in control of the manager and the management team and picking a team? So that's what I mean by that. It's a strange kind of aspect. Like, I get it, I understand it. That's what I'm saying. I understand that they're out against Derry the following week after this weekend, but at the same time, how much of that can you control on a game? Like, how can you control losing the game? It's just like a gamble.
The team you pick, I guess, as you're saying.
Yeah, but again, there's times where I've played for Dublin, and the squad was that strong that the lads that were on the fringes actually stepped up even further, and they were like adding more energy. Like, if you're playing the same team, you're competing against each other. You have the same structure systems, and in many ways, let's say for example, someone that was in my position, they would have a similar job, because you need to have nearly most of the positions. You need to have 2 players for each position that are kind of going to do that job that you need as a manager. So, and you have to have hybrid players that can kind of mix and match, like that can play in the middle third, can play in the full back line, or can rotate between the forwards. So I just don't know how. Let's say today I'm the manager of Donegal. I don't know how I'm going to go out to try lose a game, because I don't have much control. Now I can pick 11 new players onto the squad. Dynamically, that will change a lot of things, and there's a lot of variables that will happen. But at the same time, if you win that game, it shows you the strength of your squad.
Yeah. Well, I suppose he's arguing that he's not going out to lose the game. That's what he's saying. Like,
Yeah.
he was strongly saying that. Another aspect of,
How would you not get to a final then?
I don't know. It's a tough balancing act. There was another aspect of the column you wrote at the weekend that I thought was interesting, and it was the notion that you see it kind of cropping up from time to time after a team takes a hiding in a league match. Oh, they were doing a savage block of training in the build up to this game. Oh, like they were absolutely flogged. Like, no sooner had Kerry Armagh finished at the weekend than a friend of mine from Kerry texted into a WhatsApp group and, oh, Armagh apparently were absolutely bait after McGeaney had ran them into the ground. I was going to read an extract from your column last weekend and let's get your opinion there. You said there's a lot of nonsense spoken about physical preparation and peaking because the truth is, for all the science involved now, it remains an inexact one. There was some speculation recently that Donegal's performance in Salt Hill against Galway was a result of heavy training the week of the match. Now, I can't say for certain that wasn't the case, but I can say that it would absolutely be crazy to do that. Batshit crazy. And then you kind of expanded on that notion. Like, could you maybe give us a bit of an insight as to your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a dangerous game to play. You know, if you're trying to fatigue your team to underperform, like you see, the thing is, for me, when you are a manager of a team, your job is to facilitate the group to get the best out of them. Okay, so in the league, right, most of these teams, they're that good. They're big. The big prize for them is an All Ireland. Like, what team in that division there are you saying doesn't want to win an All Ireland, right? There's very few, like, right? It's probably them all, right?
Yep.
From the start of the season. So, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you use the league to drive standards and see how your systems work and how they don't work, right? So, let's say you go out and you play a game after dogging the team, right? Okay, so you're impacting. You can say, "Oh, yeah, but it's alright because we dogged them that week, so we won't look at that performance." But you've only a short amount of games to understand what works and doesn't work, particularly for this year, because every year it changes, right? You can't say, "Oh, well, what worked last year works this year." It doesn't, right? One player that moves out of your change room or moves into your change room changes the cultural dynamic, right? So, if someone says, "They were dogged that week," maybe they were. But I think it's silly. Right, I think it's silly because...
Handy excuse as well if you get hammered. It's like, oh, you know, it's like we always flogged them that week.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense. At that level of the game, the elite level of the game, what do you get out of flogging a team and getting bashed at that weekend? Like, what do you get out of it? What's the benefit? You want to not get to a league final? I don't know if that was the case, but like, what? Why would you do that? Why would you risk... It's particularly so close. Let's say I know we're honing in on Donegal a little bit here, right? But if someone pulls a hamstring, does an ankle, you know, hurts something else, they're not making it back for the Derry game. It's too close, right? So risking you, unless it's a light kind of grade, but risking somebody doing that is crazy. I remember the only non-contact injury I ever had in my career in 14 years was a hamstring, right? Never pulled my hamstring in my life. And I remember there was this new thing between the league and the championship where you had a week break. And we were given the week off, right? Some teams might have trained, we were given the week off. So myself, and we were like, but prior to that, we weren't able to go on summer holidays because you went through the whole summer up until when you got knocked out or won it, right? And myself and my wife Sarah, we went to Rome. We came back, we done a fitness test, right? Now, we weren't going to lose massive amount of fitness in those days, but maybe there was this thing of there's lads maybe out in the gargle and, you know, which is the worst thing you can do, by the way, right? You have a heavy load and you've maybe players that have drank alcohol, they're dehydrated, they are fatigued, and then if you try this old myth of, you know, train them to get the drink out of them, that doesn't work. That's the worst thing you can do, right? So anyway, we came back, done a fitness test, and then the following day we had another training session. The following training session, we done this thing called speed school. We raced each other, which was absolute bonkers. And this was one of Jim Gavin's kind of light bulb moments where he's like, "Yeah, we get everybody to race each other. We're only back from our break off, and I'm racing. And who am I in the lane?" So every time you won, it was knockout basically, right? So got through a few rounds, and you could see a few lads just going, "Oh, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting injured," right? So me being the tick I was, I'm racing beside Jack McCaffrey.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
And I dipped my head to try beat him and pop. Now, there was 3 hamstring injuries that day. Paul Flynn done his calf, right? The following gym session we done, which was the following Monday, there was 4 of us in the gym looking at each other going, "For what? what was that all about? Like, it was crazy. So the risk is very high for if you've got lads. If you want to keep your squad strong, right? So the only way you can do that and keep it competitive is have everybody available and make sure that if they're available, that they're training hard and they're competing for that jersey, right? So the stronger your squad is, the more your performance levels should drive up. The lighter your squad is, how do you get good value out of a lighter squad, right? I think also, like, if it's an assumption for me to say they're not training hard that week, but I'm also saying that day, because of the wind and the weather conditions, there is a lot of people potentially saying that was them training hard that week. But I just thought their energy was low, they were flat. There was a gale force wind. They couldn't get out from their kick out. And then Galway came out in the second half and just kept kicking the ball over the bar, taking the scoreboard over. And Donegal just didn't. I felt that they were going to. It was one of those things where you win at half time, you go, lovely, we have the win the second half. We'll score as much as they did in the first half, and that just didn't happen. It just didn't click for them. So I don't know. They did look flat. But I don't know if that was from getting dogged the week of the game.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, this is just kind of speculating about, teams maybe do that at league time. You said even Jim Gavin, that who's held as one of the great managers, didn't always get it right in terms of physical preparation. A lot of focus obviously has naturally been on the new rules and how teams are adapting to the new rules. But just to strip it back to just Gaelic football generally, like, who has been the most impressive team, rules, no rules, that you've seen over the last 6 weeks ahead of the final round, if you had to pick one?
I'm gonna go with Dublin. It's just a strange one, right? And I know people are going to go, well, Galway. Well, Galway have been consistent. But let me tell you why Dublin has impressed me. They have 16 new players, right? They've had games where there's, like, that you have to... It's very hard to set up to play a team where it builds character. And Dublin have had, I would say, 2, possibly 3 of those games already. And there's a lot of young lads in that squad who I've been extremely impressed by, and I've been impressed by the next, let's say, emerging leadership group. The likes of Scully, the likes of Bugler, Kilkenny, Howard. Those 4 in particular stepping up has been brilliant. The likes of Cian Murphy, Tom Lahiff, Sean McMahon, all fringe players when I was there, stepping up right now. Like, that back 6 that they've had the last couple of games, it's brand new bar Davy Byrne. Davy Byrne is the leader now, he's marshalling at the back. But for me, you look at them against Mayo, particularly against Kerry down there, you look at them, the comeback, obviously didn't get over the line against Armagh. It's such a big, obviously, lead in the first half. But that character building is massive. So if you're saying who's the most impressive in regards to possibly getting to a league final or win the league, probably Galway. If you're saying who's the most impressive overall in regards to what the circumstances are, I'm saying Dublin.
Would the young players in that group have been aware of the amount of retirements that were coming, or would they have been as surprised as kind of everyone else as it was dripping out? Or would there kind of been an acknowledgement in the squad that, okay, this is going to be a year where you guys are going to need to step up, or would it kind of been a shock to them as well, kind of when the league kicked off and a lot of these guys weren't actually walking back through that door?
I think Fenton and Smalley, John Small, have been a shock, definitely. Fitzsimons, probably not. And McCaffrey and Mannion, probably not. Fenton's a big one. But the one thing I've kind of looked at with this group now is, like, when I first came in to the Dublin squad with Pillow Caffrey was there 2008, and then I went to Pat Gilroy. When Pat Gilroy came in, he completely changed personnel. Like, 1 or 2 big leaders or big personalities in the change room, he was pushing out, right? Literally pushing out, like, and 1 or 2 he kept, and I see that happening now with Desi. Like, I don't see Desi pushing anybody. Don't get me wrong, it's different. There's a few lads have stepped aside, but because those lads have stepped aside, it creates a big void. A void, first of all, for leadership, which, as I mentioned, those lads have stepped up, have been brilliant. And then there's probably a little bit more needed in that void in defensively, offensively, and midfield. As I said, Howard, Scully, Blogler, and Kilkenny, they're all attacking players. But defensively, they need one or two more to step up. As I said, Keane Murphy's been very good. Davy Bourne. I think he'll grow as the championship goes on as well. So that's one void. But these young lads now, all of a sudden, are not going, I'll get a few minutes here instead of Jack McCaffrey. Or I'm going to start the game, but Jack McCaffrey's on the bench, he's going to come on. Now that helps. That gives you a competitive edge, and that makes you, get to a higher standard. But it also, with them not being there, it allows these players to play with freedom and not fear. So these lads now are at the stage where they're going, I can make mistakes and not get dropped, and learn and build and build and build. So that's why these younger lads that I'm looking at, there's a few of them there. Like Brannock has been unreal. Like he's been like a seasoned player. Like, so Adele has been there a few years, and I think he's scratching at the Desi's door to try get a starting position. He's been really good when he's come on. Who McGuinness has been really good in midfield. They've got players dotted all over the pitch that I think Tyrrell in the back. It's an look. It mightn't be the year Dublin winning All Ireland because these lads might need another year. But I've been impressed, and I think there's a lot of Dublin fans potentially that have said this is probably the year where there's a big difference in performances. I haven't seen that just yet.
Well, it's funny, when you were on with Joe a couple of weeks ago, it was just after the Kerry game, and then at the time he said it would be like one of the great achievements in Dublin football history if they went on to win an All Ireland. But it seems that even between then and now, you've kind of changed your thinking a bit on the kind of potential of the team.
Well, they haven't shown any fear, so anybody they've played. The big thing is when you go out and play in the league, right? And right now, again, going back to that point, that this league is a brilliant, it's a brilliant division to be in, because these are the teams that are going to get to the latter stages potentially. So if you can outperform these teams and have one or two lessons within that, the Armagh game was definitely a lesson from the kick-out point of view. There's other lessons in it, right? But basically, if you can finish the league and go, okay, we don't fear anybody. We've played everybody. We've seen their strengths. We've seen their weaknesses. We've seen our strengths and weaknesses. Now we've a plan going forward in the championship. That gives you confidence, and confidence is having the answer to everything. So when you go onto the pitch as a fullback, if I'm marking a player and I know, I've watched his clips, I know he's going to do, this is his A game, he's going to kick from there, this is a sweet spot, this is the way he gets the ball, this is his run. I'm confident because I know this. And then I'm building up what ifs, what kind of happens if he doesn't do this and does. So in anything in life, once you have the answers to that particular thing or stimulus or event, that is confidence. So that's what you'd be doing. That's what Desi, I'm sure, consciously or subconsciously, would be doing with the group, going, right, we played everybody. We've 16 new players. We've blooded in a lot of new lads, and they've showed their potential. We should be excited for the championship this year. Let's go for it.
And they had their most impressive win of the campaign the weekend, 219 to 213 over Galway in Croke Park. And just to change tack slightly to the rules, and specifically the rules in Croke Park, because watching that great game at the weekend, I heard a few people say that there's something about Croke Park, the dimensions that kind of unlock a new dimension of the rules that we wouldn't maybe have seen. And you mentioned the weather earlier, some of the wind games that have kind of produced kind of crazy scores, but even just the provincial pitches maybe a little tighter. Do you kind of go along with that? Is there something about Croke Park, especially when we get into the summertime, that we'll see maybe an even greater side to the rules that we haven't already?
I agree with that. I think the stadiums that have the bigger, wider pitches will be the spaces for the rules to really flourish, and Croke Park, I think, has shown that in the few games we've seen, and it nearly feels like it's end to end, and the teams aren't getting enough. They don't have enough bodies getting back quick enough. The kick out gives you more space. Like, you look at the Armagh, Dublin Armagh game, like, it was one dimensional. Like, right, if you want to really have a good first half, go after Evan Comfort's kick out. Like, he's not kicking to the two wing back positions where there's a tighter space. He's just going to kick long. So either get up and win the ball, or break the ball and get under the break and be like dogs and go and attack and attack and attack. That's not the way the game should be. The game should not be linear like that, right? And that's why I think I would have questioned the kick out rule that I agree not to go back to the keeper, but I do think they should be able to kick inside that arc. You should be able to have a short range, medium range, and long range. Otherwise, you've only one kick out, which means you can go left, middle, or right, but you're going long.
I still prefer that though as a spectator.
Yeah, but
Like, does it, like, I take your point that like technically for teams they should have that option, but just as like just speaking purely as someone watching a game, I just like a ball that's like a 95% completion rate doesn't create that kind of excitement.
I know, but it means that you've only got one real option. It goes back to the game we had in the 80s, maybe. Just kick long, go up and win it. And then what happens really as well is that, you know, we don't need the skillful keepers anymore. We don't need the skillful midfielders anymore, right? Now, if you can get a midfielder who can win a ball and also be skillful, you're laughing. Like, Brian Fenton is that person. But there's very few. Like, if you look at the team, like if you look at the what teams are doing now, they're bringing these two big massive midfielders in and just saying, right, okay, lump it down the middle, and so you're taking a skill set away from a position in a midfielder, right? Because it's very, very, very rarely that you get a big, tall 6'3", 4" player that can play football, right? So I would, in my opinion, I wouldn't be keen on that, and I just think, if you get to a stage where you watch Armagh just go after Dublin's kick out, that's great for Armagh fans. I get it. But it's crap for Dublin fans. They're just going, oh, here.
Well, what about neutrals? Is that not go for neutrals?
Depends if you don't like the team they're playing. Let's say you don't have any bias towards a team. Let's say if you're watching that Armagh Dublin game, you'd be saying, oh yes, lovely, Dublin are getting bashed here, like, because they've won so much. Or if they were Armagh and you're from the north and you're going, oh, they're all-Ireland champions, I don't want them to be winning whoever they're playing. But if there was a complete non-bias towards that, you'd be saying, oh, right, here's this kick out. It's going the same way. It's going to be sloppy, breaking ball, and I just don't enjoy that. Like, I just think that was the game years ago. And when Stephen Cluxton started kicking these kind of medium range to Shane Ryan running onto, I preferred that. I think it gives you more dynamics. It makes it changes the flow and the flight plan of the game, right? Because you can attack different ways then.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like the kick out has been generally well received, but obviously you're coming from having played intercounty football and definitely being on the tactical side very in tune with that. But I wonder if you just ask like the average GA supporter what they think after the first 6 rounds, what they'd say.
Yeah, I'd say probably similar to your opinion. I think they'd go, well, Jesus, I'm enjoying that there's a few lads going up and winning the ball, and there's a bit of a schmozzle at the end of it in the breaking. But I still think like there's very few pitches. Croke Park like gives you that space to be able to kind of manoeuvre a little bit, you know, from a medium range to a long range kick out. But it's yeah, I just don't. I suppose I'm probably a bit more of a purist, that I'm kind of like, let's play football here. Let's not just boot the ball up. Like years ago, they used to kick the ball out, and if you got afraid, they'd put the ball on the ground and they just boot it up, just put it down, boot it up, keep it. And for me, that was like, sometimes when we would watch Jim Gavin would bring in, you know, clips of
The 70s.
those type of games, and you could hear lads going, like, total respect for everybody that played for Dublin over the years. That was ingrained in us. But you'd see lads doing, like, lads sniggering, like, going, jeez, look at that, like, they're just booting the ball. There's no skill in that at all, like, you know. And I remember watching Dublin when Paddy Christie used to bring us to the games, and I remember Davy Bourne, the Ballymun Kick, was Dublin goalkeeper. He just used to put the ball down and he just used to run, like properly run it and just welly in the air. And I just think when you look at that compared to the kick out, you know, look at that, what they did to a Stephen Cluxton kick out, which is more attractive. I think a Stephen Cluxton kick out, driving, you know, low trajectory onto a player and mixing the long ball out to the wing. I just think having a mixture is...
What did you make of Stephen Cluxton's return in that regard? I know the first few kickouts, obviously.
Yeah, I think he struggled in the first half. And that's going to happen. He hasn't played this year. Like,
I'd love to know what he makes of the new rules, because obviously he doesn't talk really at all. But just like, like what does, you know, especially because the goalkeeper's been such a focus, it wouldn't maybe obviously have been his strength, like a Niall Morgan raiding up the pitch. But I just love to, as a man who's been playing Gaelic football since 2001 at inter-county level, what he's made of this sea change.
I would imagine in his role, I would say the kick out one would be, the type of person he is, none of these rules would bother him. Like, he just gets on with it and finds a way. from my experience working with him. But I would say you seen him trying to hit the kind of the wing back positions, that kind of a little space that's there. A few of them went over the sideline, so he has to probably get his range in now a little bit different. But in regards to the keeper, that was the rule. That was, you had your 12v11. He would be able to play that role, right? Because he's played outfield for Parnells. But the type of person he is, I'm sure he's just like, there's better players that can attack than me. I'll just stay here, and we've got players to do that. Like, he would have been in the opinion at times for me, like, he's like, you don't need to go up. There's better forwards there. And I was like, but that's not the point of me going up. The point of me going up is to fatigue my man. So when he gets back up the other end of the pit, comes back up to the forward line, that he's too tired to run. And plus, I'm a kicker of the ball, so I can supply ball into the full forward line much quicker than someone that's carrying the ball. And we had very few kickers. Over the years, you'd have kickers maybe in the half forward line, Dermot Connolly and other players, but in the full back line, I wanted to transition fast and kick. So, yeah. So it'd be interesting to see who starts the last game. They've played 3 different keepers now. I thought Evan, a bit harsh on Evan because he actually kept him in the game with a couple of saves in Armagh, and he couldn't do it. All he could do was kick the ball out long and hope that they win the ball, but it didn't happen for them.
What about the other new rules now that we're like 6 rounds in and like the championship is basically around the corner? Like, have you been pleased with what you've seen? I know when we chatted to you a couple of weeks ago, you were pretty positive.
Yeah.
Does that stay now?
Yeah, still positive. And again, I think there's what I'm fascinated about is actually how they are basically connected. Like, for example, when you attack, obviously the opposition are going to get behind the D and defend from that area. But the fact that you have a 2-pointer means they have to come out a little bit. I'd like to see teams trying to combat that a little bit more by kicking the ball inside. So if you watch this weekend, you'll see that the defensive team are set up where they're just protecting the D, and you generally will see a 1v1 inside in the full forward position. And there's a big gap between, let's say, the centre back position and the full back position. And I'd like to see a few more teams pop balls into that zone, have runners off. Particularly, like, if you look at Murphy being in there, he gives you an option that as a full back you'll have to mark behind him. Because if you mark in front of him, there's a potential he wins the ball over your head and you're scrambling backwards. And the fact that you have to mark behind him means he can get the ball out in front. But there's other players there that can do that. But I'd like to see... Now, again, I'm watching this space as someone that's played the game, and I'm watching the space and going, look, there's the gap, go, kick it. It's different when you're on ground level and you're not watching from a TV or a stand. When you're on ground level, you see bodies in front of you. So it's a bit harder. But I think if teams can get after that a little bit more, it will make the defensive structure change a bit. So instead of you looking out the pitch, you're looking behind you to see what ball's in behind you. And if you can get a team doing that, it means you've got space then to attack. Because you see there's loads of different formations now. Some teams will play 5 in the full forward line to stretch the group so that you can actually attack with runners. So that's what that's where my headspace goes to when I'm watching games. The tap and goal was being interesting. The advanced mark and the advantage rule last weekend, I was confused with. Some people were educating me on it. There was a ball into Comer, was it? And he caught the ball. And no, maybe it wasn't Comer. I think there was another Galway player. Anyway, he caught the ball. He turned. I think he potentially got fouled. The ref blew the whistle, and then the player took a shot and went in and they scored the goal off Howard's hand. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, what is that? Is that the advanced mark? Is that the advantage rule? Or did he just make a mistake and blow the whistle and then the player kicked the ball and then he gave them the goal? So there's still grey area there that maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just slow to kind of get onto some of the rules. I still don't get the throw up in the middle.
Just a 1v1?
I don't get it. Like, I just... Why, like?
Yeah, of all the things they needed to tackle, I don't think people were crying about the 2v2.
No, like, and people are going, oh, well, people are fouling. So what? Gets the crowd going. Like, let them, like, look at Hurling. The referee nearly gets his shins taken off. So those little things, the hooter at the end, I think that's good. I think now that you have to kick the ball out play, I think that's interesting. I think it's good. I don't get the spray thing. They're not, the players taking the freeze are not sticking to that. You see them running by it. It's different in soccer. You put the ball down at it. But players are running kind of a little bit outside of it. Watch this weekend again, and I'm talking about Dublin, I'm talking about other players. Like, I don't know if it works, you know.
Just on the rules generally, like I know forecasting ahead a bit, but if we get to an All-Ireland final and like the new rules have like a huge material impact on the winner and loser of the game, like say if a team kicks 6 2-pointers in the second half and wins by a huge margin, will we look at that All-Ireland final the same way we would look at an All-Ireland final we've watched in the last couple of years and say, oh yeah, like this, obviously this team will win the All-Ireland, they'll get the cup, but if a very kind of new rule has a huge material impact on the outcome, say in a massive match like a final, will give people pause for some reason maybe?
I think you can look at that both ways. I think you can say, right, okay, let's say a team pulls away after scoring 2 or 3 2-pointers. But there's the other side of it where a team is down a few points and you're kind of going, this game is like
Not over.
You can still grab this game with 2 3-pointers or 3 3-pointers, 3 2-pointers. I think it gives you. So if you look at an All-Ireland final and you're 4 points up, 5 points up, a team, what do? They generally go into a headspace where they go, right, we need a goal here. Very rarely do they score the goal, like, but when they do, the crowd goes bonkers, right? Because they're like, oh, we're back in it, like we did against Kerry in 2011, right? But that's very rare, like that happens. There's more chances that a team over the years in an All-Ireland final that are down that much will actually go further behind because they're trying so much to go for goals and the opposition attacks and you've got so much space left out, after attacking. But for me, I think it allows the team to think, this is not over here. Like, if we're 5 points down, with 3 kicks away from like 3 points, you win. You get the first 2-pointer. I'd like to see what teams are doing in regards to setting up for 2-pointers. Like, there's times where I'm looking at lads outside the arc and they're get like little technical problems I see is where their body position is in the wrong. It's shown the wrong side. Like, so for example, if they're getting the ball, hand pass it to their feet or out in front or up over their head, that split second means that point is not on now. So the skill set, the technical side of the games for the 2-pointer for me is something I'd be really driving home if I was in a team or managing a team. It's like, get that hand pass to the chest like you would if you're giving someone a 3-pointer. If you give it to them their feet, that split second means the 3-pointer's not on. So that technical side of things, is your body shape ready to just get that ball in a split second, then go, right, I'm kicking this. Because as soon as you start thinking differently is the time where you either take a shot and miss or the shot's not on. So
Sounds like you have been thinking. When I asked you the first question, have you been looking at the new rules in this league through the prism of being an inter-county manager? It sounds like you have.
I just can't get out. Like, I was like that when I was a kid. When I go to games, I always say I was never really in the hills screaming for the Dubs. I was obviously a Dublin fan, but I'd be studying the game. I've always been a student of the game, and particularly when Jim Gavin came in, he would have drilled that into us to be students of the game.
So any of the other teams, before we kind of start wrapping up, that have caught your eye? You know, you mentioned Dublin, obviously. We discussed Donegal and maybe some preparation. You know, their kind of their priorities. Anyone else kind of been catching your eye?
I watched actually Monaghan and Meath the weekend, and I was impressed by Monaghan. And I know they're in Division 2, but like, I was impressed by the how they went after Meath down in Park Talton. And yeah, like it's been hot and cold for most teams, hasn't it? Really, like, Galway have been consistent, but they've still shown weaknesses. They've shown, and I think every team has done that. Like, Derry being the opposite have showed promise, but haven't got any points on the board. Like, they've got one draw, but like they needed to get a few more points to probably be in a safe space to think that they can try things. They haven't, but all the teams, I think, have shown promise and also shown weaknesses and areas where they need to improve on, which makes the All-Ireland series very, very appetising.
And this weekend as well in particular is appetising. As I mentioned at the start, 5 teams can make a final, 4 teams can get relegated. I think it would actually be unfair to ask you to make a prediction because there's so many.
I knew it was coming.
There's so many different permutations. So yeah, to reiterate the fixtures, we have Tyrone versus Dublin. That's kind of, I suppose, the best fixtures in terms of Tyrone fighting for their lives. Dublin trying to get to a league final. But Galway, Kerry as well has lots of jeopardy. You know, if Kerry beat Galway, they could be in a league final. If they lose, they could easily be relegated. Mayo, Donegal and Armagh, Derry, I suppose, is maybe more dictated by what teams are put out. I think Derry have already indicated they might not pick their strongest team, so Armagh probably take that one at home, and then Mayo, Donegal, it's hard to know what Jim McGuinness might do. But who do you fancy getting to a league final out of those matches?
Galway, and I like Galway for me because they've actually intended to go and win the league. You know, Joyce has come out and said, "Look, we want to win the league." Like, you know, so that's why I think they'll be in the hot seat for me. And God, the other team, who's it going to be? Like, Dublin have nothing to lose, like, as well. Like,
Yeah, they don't play for another,
they've
2 weeks afterwards?
yeah, they've absolutely and I can tell you from playing like that, you want to be playing another game. You don't want to be finishing your league early and having an extra week or two to get the
Or speed school.
or speed skill and to do your slogging. Like, you don't want to do that. You want to play another match, particularly for these younger lads. I think that'll be important. So I think it's going to be a big challenge for that group going up to Tyrone, particularly they're a wounded animal at the minute in terms of survival. And I thought they would have kicked on this year with O'Rourke going in, which they kind of had to an extent, but it's just such a tight league. So I'm going to go Dublin and Galway.
And I think if that comes to pass, who are we looking at? Maybe Tyrone. Yeah, Tyrone going down along with Derry as well. So
Yeah,
that's where we'd be at.
well, that's where they are now, aren't they? at the minute?
They're in the relegation zone. It's funny, like, you know, you have a balancing act. You don't want to make it final. You don't want to get relegated. It's like you have to hit the exact sweet spot. So it'll be interesting to see how teams approach this weekend with team selection. But yeah, it should be a great weekend. For now, Philly, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers.